All right, so I'm going to do 17D, which talks about that a reduced sodium hot dog is at least 30% less than its regular counterpart. So what I did is I did 765 times 0.7, so that's how I get 30% less, and I got 325.5. So that is what my HO is going to be. Mu is equal to 325.5, and that's milligrams of sodium. Okay, I'm just going to this is kind of like defining your proportions, all right? I'm just telling you what my units are. Now, believe me, I have never seen where you have to figure out the HO. Typically, they do that. All right, now, do you agree for sodium? Reduced dog sodium that I want to have less than that, right? So I'm going to have less than. Okay, so this is just like proportions. I still have I have HA, HO, I still have mu, and the number stays the same. The only thing that changes is the sign between mu and the number. Okay, so now let's do conditions. First one is random. And I'm looking at 17D, and I do not see tested samples. I do not see the word random, so I am going to say assume that the hot dogs were chosen randomly. Okay, so I need to go on to another screen to continue. The next one is going to be 10% condition. This talks about my independence. And so N is 60, so I have 60 is less than 10% of all hot dogs. Come on, of all hot dogs. Okay, and so now I'm going to do the large enough. The book calls it nearly normal. So this is the deal. Remember, we have 3 conditions. 1, the sample has to be random. 2, it has to be independent. And 3, it has to be big enough. All right, so for the T distribution, we have to prove that the sample has a somewhat normal distribution shape. All right, and so I know this is confusing, but we're concerned about 2 different distributions. In this condition, we want to prove that the sample it has a shape of a normal distribution. Now, remember, because of the CLT, the central limit theorem, if n is greater than 30, no matter how I take my samples, I will always get a normal distribution. So I'm going to say, and 60 is my n, so since 60 is large, we have a normal distribution due to the CLT. Central limit theorem. And so now I'm going to say conditions for a T distribution have been met. Okay, so remember, it's for a T distribution because it's quantitative data. All right, so now I'm going to do my T-score. The formula is T sub D sub F is equal to what I am curious about, the mean of my sample, minus what we know to be true divided by my standard deviation, which is s divided by the square root of n. All right, so the reason why we have to have a subscript of the degrees of freedom, because remember, t relies on two things. It relies on degrees of freedom and it degrees on alpha, where normal just relies on alpha. So degrees of freedom is easy. It's n minus 1, so I'm going to say 59 is equal to my mean, and in this problem they tell me is 318. Now minus my mu, what I had down, which is what, 325? 325.5 divided by my standard deviation, which is 32 divided by the square root of 60. Okay, this is 325.5, this number up here, okay? All right, so now I'm going to go to my graphing calculator. So I'm going to go hit stats, tests, and I'm doing a t-test. And I have stats. Remember, if I had the sodium content for each of the hot dogs, that would be data. But they gave me the mean and the standard deviation. So my mu naught is 325.5. My standard deviation is 318. Excuse me, my mean of my sample is 318. My standard deviation is 32, and my n is 60. And I want to know about less. Okay, and then I get a t of negative 1.82. So the probability that my sample is less than 325.5 is equal to the probability that t sub 59 is less than negative 1.82 is equal to my p-value, which is 0.0373. Okay, so I'm looking up here to see if there's an alpha. They do talk about a 95% confidence interval, so I'm going to say alpha is equal to 0.05. So I'm going to make my decision, and so we will reject my HO since my p-value of 0.0373 is less than my alpha, which is 0.05. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next. So if we reject, that means we're going with HA. So there is evidence to suggest that the 60 sampled hot dogs can be claimed as reduced sodium hot dogs. All right, so here is this problem. Now, I'll be honest with you. I told us the second period that if you take the quiz on the days that I assign them, your ends will always be greater than 30. If you take them late, then you got to do data. All right? So hopefully you don't think that's too hard. If not, please come in for tutoring. I'll be more than happy to help you.